This is a case that women are the focus for many reasons. First, almost all the victims are female. That, unfortunately, isn't unique or new. However, second, the person that sets off this case is a woman. The families, mostly mothers and sisters, kept their loved ones in the focus of the media. They pushed police to get answers. They did not take no's for an answer. They did not simply just lie down and take what the men were telling them. That they were at fault for living high-risk lifestyles. The families kept the victims human. It took an upheaval of the good old boy system for a woman to come in and reignite the cold cases that paved the way for an arrest. But again, this all started with a phone call. Hey all, and welcome back to There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani. And today, we're going to be talking about the Long Island serial killer. Shannan Gilbert disappeared in May of 2010. That night, she called 911, telling the operator she's in Long Island and the people she's with are plotting to kill her. Then, the phone call ends. Next, in Suffolk, was a string of 911 calls. One was a man stating a woman was screaming down the road that she needed help. Then an older woman called, claiming there was a woman outside her door screaming she was in danger. Unfortunately for us, that lady did not open the door. Shannan grew up in Ellendale, New York, with two sisters, as well as another half-sister. She was in and out of foster care, and Cherie, one of her sisters, called her a wild child. Friends say she was caring and intelligent. Graduating high school at 16 years old, she felt that she had to take care of herself, and the easiest way to make money was to be an escort. Her mother said that in one of their last conversations, Shannan talked about how much money she was making and that her clients were doctors and lawyers and people like that. That once she earned her degree, she planned on quitting. Shannan Gilbert left her home in Jersey City on April 30th, 2010, and went to Manhattan. Shannan was an independent escort and went to meet with her driver, Michael Pack. Around midnight, a man named Joe Brewer, a client, he called. He lived in Oak Beach on Long Island and was promising a few hours, prompting the pair to drive over 90 minutes to Joe's house. Michael stays in the car at this point, and around 4 a.m., which is about 3 hours in, Joe comes out telling him that Shannan simply won't leave. Michael told her they should leave, and allegedly Joe grabbed her arm, causing her to freak out and run out the house and down the road. A neighbor, Gus Coletti, reported that just after 5 a.m., she came and was banging on his door. Gus got her inside and told her to sit. The police were on the way, and when he said the word police, he reported that she took off and ran and hid between a car and a boat. Michael said at that point he found her, and he tried to get her back to the car, but again, she took off on him. And after that, Michael reported being unable to locate her, eventually prompting him to simply drive home without her. Detective Stuart Cameron received a call about Shannan being missing. He went out and spoke with Joe and the neighbors and didn't find anything on his follow-up. And from that, he assumed that she went home and there was going to be no case. Then, Mary Gilbert came out, and she also reported Shannan missing. This is her daughter, after all. Her attorney said that when she went to the police department, she was laughed at because Shannan was a prostitute. Mary fought to keep Shannan's name out there, but it took her 8 months to get Suffolk police to actually go out and look for her. Then, on December 11th, 2010, remains were found on Gilgo Beach, just off Oceanside Parkway. An officer who was taking his cadaver dog out on his own time ended up being the man who found the remains. Still, it wasn't until 3 days later that a full-blown police investigation even took hold. It was an intact human skeleton that they found first. Initially, they even notified Mary, saying they found Shannan, but realized it wasn't possible as Shannan had a metal plate on the left side of her lower jaw, and the remains didn't have any metal. As a result, the police went back out and continued to search the area. They ended up finding 3 more sets of remains. All of the women were bound in burlap. The FBI was called out to assist in recovery of the remains and evidence collection, though there ended up being little evidentiary value found at the time. Quickly, it was interpreted that the women were all likely sex workers. None of them matched the local missing persons, and so the search needed to be expanded. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was from Norwich, Connecticut. Maureen went missing on July 9th, 2007. Maureen traveled to New York City just prior to the 9th for what younger sister Melissa Cann was told was for modeling. And on the 9th, Maureen called Melissa to say that she needed a ride out of New York City. But as Melissa lived in Connecticut, she was unable to go get her. Maureen responded that she'd take the train, and that was the last she heard from Maureen. Sarah Carnes was a friend of Maureen and said that the pair were Thelma and Louise of the escort service. They put ads out on Craigslist and had a set of rules that they abided by. First was, trust your gut. No amount of money is really going to be worth it. They would text each other when they were at locations. But on July 6th, Maureen was served eviction papers and was desperate to earn about $3,000 to cover everything she needed. Eviction court was on Tuesday, July 10th. So the duo worked over the weekend, and on Monday, Sarah was headed home, and Maureen said that she was going to stay and try to continue to earn enough money to get through this court. Then, Maureen missed court on Tuesday, and that's when Sarah informed Melissa what the two were really doing in New York. Melissa immediately went to New York, at the last location that she knew her sister was. They put up flyers. Melissa contacted over 18 different precincts, and no locations would add her to the missing persons list after finding out what her occupation was. Sarah helped in the search. She felt she had to. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a phone call from a blocked number, and they said they saw her ad on Craigslist and asked if she was also from Connecticut, saying he had just been with another girl from there, Marie, which is what Maureen went by when she was escorting. The man said that he saw her in a whorehouse in Queens. Sarah asked the caller to call back in an unblocked number so that she could get it and help report police of the situation. He said yes, but, of course, he never called back. On July 24th, 2001, 6 weeks after the police found the skeletal remains, a press conference was held. All 4 women were finally identified. Melissa Barthelemy, 24 years old, who went missing on July 12, 2009 from the Bronx. Megan Waterman, 22 years old, from Scarborough, Maine, who went missing in June of 2010, last seen in the Hauppauge, New York. Amber Costello, 27 years old, last seen in September of 2010, and was last seen in North Avalon. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, last seen in New York City on June 9, 2007. Melissa Barthelemy came from Buffalo, New York, where her parents owned a hot dog restaurant in the area. Her mother, Lynn, said that she was beautiful all the way around and feisty. Jeff, her stepfather, stated that she was smart and wanted to go to beauty school with aspirations to open up her own beauty salon. But bills were piling up, and she met a man who became her pimp. Things didn't go well, and so she began advertising on Craigslist. The family stated that after she went missing, they called hospitals and hotels looking for her. Her younger sister, the then 15-year-old Amanda, started receiving calls from Melissa's phone. But a man was the speaker. He called about 7 times in total, saying things like, quote, "Are you a whore like your sister?" end quote. The calls would only last about a minute or a minute and a half, and the last call was the man saying that he had killed Melissa and was going to watch her rot. Megan Waterman thought she was safe and nothing would happen to her, that she was working as a sex worker temporarily, according to Sister Amanda. Amanda said Megan was sweet, caring, and just kind, that she was everything you could ever want in a sister. She was last seen on June 6, 2010, leaving the Holiday Inn. Lorraine, Megan's mother, reported that it took Suffolk County Police over a month to even go in to the Holiday Inn to investigate, that they simply didn't seem to care once they found out she was a sex worker. Amber Costello disappeared 3 months after her in September of 2010. She and her sister both lived in New York, working as sex workers. Amber, however, had become dependent on drugs and lived with her boyfriend and another man. Their setup was that when a client came in, the boyfriend, Dave, would come in and pretend to be just angry, which most of the time resulted in her clients just getting up and leaving the money without her having to do much of the work. During the press release, Suffolk County DA Thomas Spoda stated that the women were in high-risk lifestyles, and the result of their deaths were directly related to that. The family, however, reminded the press that they were women, to stop putting out that they were prostitutes or hookers, that people won't give information if they see them as just these workers, that they were women, and that should be the true focus. Police continued their stance that Shannan's case was not related to the 4 women found on the beach at this time. They focus on the first women and their cases. First, with Amber. Again, Amber Costello was one of the last ones to be seen before the victims were found. Investigators, clearly focus on her, which is the right thing to do. 2 of her roommates, Dave Schaller and Bear Brodsky, report that there was a guy that was on their radar. Weeks before she went missing, a guy showed up to their house, and Amber told him she'd only be dancing that day, but he kept grabbing at her. That prompted her to run to the bathroom and call her friends for help. The 2 men returned home to find Amber in the bathroom and this man still in the house. Dave reported that he was a huge guy. He ended up later giving a complete description to Suffolk County Police, that he was around 6'6", 250, beady eyes and glasses. He gave the brown hair, brown eye colored description, and that he drove away in a dark green Chevy Avalanche. Still, nothing seems to come of it at this time. Dave even stated that after the event, the man kept calling Amber asking for credit. He called so much that Amber ended up relenting when she was offered another $1,500 to go out and see him. She was never to be seen again until they found her skeletal remains. As part of the investigation, all of the women's cell phone data was extracted along with information of the person they were last connected with. After doing data analysis, it was determined the bulk of the man's cell phone data was coming from towers in Massapequa Park, making investigators believe that he was a local to that area. After more analysis, some calls during the day seemed to be from Manhattan, and investigators then surmised that he likely worked in Manhattan and lived in Long Island. In the meantime, Mary kept pressure on police regarding Shannan's case. Coupled with the media coverage, things eventually had to happen. Finally, on March of 2011, the police went back out to search the area, slowly expanding from where they started. Then, on March 29th, 2011, 4 more bodies were found. Then, 2 more. 10 women in total. In May 9th, 2011, another press release with DA Thomas Spoda. Partial remains of Jessica Taylor, whose torso was found in Manorville in 2003, which is 50 miles northeast of the area, was identified. An Asian male that was dressed as a crossdresser. A toddler was found in the area as well. The 9th was a bag of extremities, and the 10th was simply a skull. On December 6, 2011, 19 months after she disappeared, once again the search for Shannan was on. This time they focused on the marsh that was right next to where she had been last seen. Police report that they didn't search the marsh before because it was, quote, brackish, end quote, and cold, and that her disappearance was a mystery, and so they didn't dedicate resources to the area as it might have been hazardous to their own police force, which sounds like a really lame excuse to not look for a woman who was clearly in distress. Naturally, when police finally decide to do their jobs, they go out and do the correct thing, and they find her pocketbook, ID, cell phone, and jeans, close to where she had last been seen. More resources are brought out as a result, including vehicles and extra manpower to search the 100-acre marsh. At the same time, it was nearing the anniversary of when the original girls were found, so families came out to the site to pay their respects. The same day, on December 13th, 2011, An 11th victim was found nude in the marsh. This time, Shannan Gilbert was positively identified a half a mile away from her last known location. DA Thomas Spoda reported that she may have accidentally drowned while attempting to make it to the highway, not willing to report this as a homicide. Families come out in absolute disbelief that investigators would be quick to label it as such, with 10 other homicide victims so close to her, and a 911 call saying that people were out to kill her. The medical examiner reported cause of death and manner of death was undetermined, so the family brought out New York pathologist Michael Bowden to re-examine Shannan. He reported damage to the hyoid bone and windpipe, which suggested strangulation. This is, of course, consistent with homicide. Richard Dahmer, Suffolk Police County Commissioner, stated many times that the theory is that there is one killer. However, DA Spoda disputed this, as the first 4 victims were found intact and in burlap, while the others are not, and 2 sets of remains were even cut up and scattered in multiple locations, leading to public confusion on if police were searching for multiple killers or one serial killer. Soon after Dahmer retired, Jim Burke becomes the chief of the department brought in by Spoda. Burke sounds like the worst choice here. His career was marred with internal investigations and controversy. He immediately hampers the investigation, which is the only reason we're talking about him at all. He refused to allow any more cell phone data to be collected, essentially halting anything else that could be done to solve this case. He even stopped working with the FBI. Then, a cold case resulted in an arrest on July 22, 2014, of John Bitroff. In the late 1990s, 2 women were killed, Colleen McNamee and Rita Tangretti. They were found in the Pine Barrens near Manorville, which is the location of 2 of the women of the Gilgo Beach murders, body parts being found. Both women were also known sex workers, leading the public to believe the crimes were related. However, DA Spoda stated in a press conference that he did not believe they were connected. A 3rd woman is suspected to be a victim of John's as well, Sandra Costella, and she was another sex worker who was killed in Southampton. And while he's suspected, he is not indicted on Sandra's case, but he is ultimately convicted of Colleen McNamee and Rita Tangretti. And I'll explain in just a little bit why I'm even bringing this into the mix. On December 9th, 2015, the chief of police, Jim Burke, was arrested by the FBI for beating and torturing a young man who had broken into his car years prior. The man made statements and had physical proof that he was beaten via medical exams, yet the police held ranks for years until someone finally grew a conscience and broke. During the investigation, it came to light that DA Spoda was part of the cover-up, and they both served time for their parts in these crimes. The result is, in 2018, Geraldine Hart, former FBI director, becomes the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, and this case desperately needed her. She immediately reopened the investigation into the Gilgo murders. She brought the police and FBI back together and pushed forward collaboration of the 2. They used genetic genealogy to identify Jane Doe number 6 as Valerie Mack. Hart put out information publicly, including evidence recovered in an attempt to help identify the killer. She released a belt buckle that was either HM or WH on it, hoping to spark new interest in the case. DA Ray Tierney takes over in 2022, and he bolsters the case. On February 1st, 2022, the police start by digitizing all of the information in the Gilgo Beach murders, finding the avalanche, and they start a search. There is one person who meets the description in the size of the man that was reported by Dave years prior. He lived in Massapequa Park area and worked in downtown Manhattan. He is just ticking every box that they can find. On March 14th, 2022, they finally had a name, Rex Heuerman. From there, they dive into Rex. They issued over 300 subpoenas as they dive into his background and his life. They find that he lived in Massapequa Park with his wife and 2 children. Cell phone data collected, proving that while he used burner phones, he often had his personal phone with him and they would ping in the same area at the same time. At one point, surveillance identified him adding minutes to one of his burner phones. They found he was still using anonymous emails to solicit sex workers, creating a sense of urgency to arrest Rex. But for the time, everything that they had collected on him was simply circumstantial evidence. So police go back to the limited evidence that they did have, which included 5 hairs found on the tape used to bind some of the women. It was determined that they were actually female hairs. And so police went to the garbage cans, basically, of Asa, Rex's wife, and she had left some bottles on the curb, and so they took the DNA, and it matched the hairs found on the tape, which they believe was not anything malicious. They think it was just simply transference because the two lived together. On Megan Waterman, police did find male hair, therefore they needed to match it to Rex. Police surveillance also followed him, picking up his DNA after he discarded a partially eaten pizza in a pizza box. That was compared to the hair that was found on one of the victims, and it matched. On July 13th, 2023, Rex was arrested outside his architecture firm. He was originally charged with 3 counts of murder in the first degree for Melissa, Megan, and Amber. When his mugshot came up on the news, Bear and Dave both confirmed that that was the man that they had reported on 13 years prior. Next was a search of his home. There, police recovered electronic devices, and while wiped, police were able to recover some information from them. It included searches of the case, the victims, and derogatory porn. Police also looked at family movements during the commission of these crimes. It was noted that family would go on vacations during the time of the disappearances and murders of his victims, after which Rex would join his family about a week in, leading police to believe the family knew nothing of the murders. Rex was allegedly abused by his father, and although he was very large, even as a schoolchild, he wouldn't fight back when he was being picked on. Still, he stayed in his family home, though he let it become more derelict than not. Police were even surprised to find out that he was an architect. Even after police tore up the house looking for evidence, his family returned even after his arrest. Police brought in a backhoe and dug up parts of his yard, for example. They took out drains. They were looking for any piece of evidence that they could find. And then just a few months later, after the initial one, police served a second search warrant at the house and expanded their search to Manorville and North Sea based on the evidence found during their first search and seizure at the home. North Sea is where Sandra Castilla was found in November of 1993. On June 6, 2024, Tierney announced additional charges for the 1993 murder of Sandra Castillo and 2003 murder of Jessica Taylor. Sandra had hairs found on her, and they were excluded to be the original person that they thought was the murderer, but it was found that Rex could not be excluded. So like I had told you before, I spoke briefly about John Bittroff that had been convicted of 2 of the 3 women that were murdered in the late 90s. And it sounds like all of these women were murdered and put out in kind of the same manner, which made police believe that it was the work of one killer. Yet, even though the DNA excluded John from Sandra's case, he was again prosecuted for the other women. And it should be noted that even after Rex was arrested for the murder of Sandra Castillo, John, they have not revisited his case for the other 2, and it doesn't really sound like they plan on it anytime soon. And I just thought that was an aside that maybe you should give some pause to. During this time, police also reported that Rex created a file about in 2000 that had also been wiped, but they were able to, of course, find it and back it up. It was his manifesto. In the document, there was information such as how he evolved and how he killed and how to avoid detection, plant dump sites, supplies needed, how to get rid of evidence, which included cutting off tattoos and arms and heads. This shows how he evolved his style while he was murdering women, leading most to believe that he was the killer of all of the victims that have been found in that area. Rex was charged with a total of 7 murders based on evidence found that conclusively tied him to them. At this time, he has pleaded not guilty to the murders, and his trial is set for after Labor Day of 2026, according to the trial judge. In the meantime, Rex had property in Las Vegas, and it appears police are hoping to get his DNA and use it against some of their unsolved murders of sex workers in the area. Additionally, in South Carolina, where one of Rex's avalanches was found and recovered, the task force investigating the women on Long Island stated that it's going to continue. The cases of many, including 3 unidentified bodies, Karen Vergata and Valerie Mack, are also not solved. They would like to identify the last 3 and solve the cases for everyone that was found. I was surprised that many sources stated that some of the investigators were confounded by the fact that some of the victims were whole and some of them were dismembered. As I just said, Rex had a manifesto, and in part of it, he was talking about how he was evolving and that he should take off the head and hands to make people unidentifiable, as well as markers such as tattoos. It was part of his evolution. He's creating his changing MO, but it still stands to reason that he could likely be the serial killer for all of these women. And that is really where we're sitting at this case right now. We are waiting to see if they find any information that they can conclusively tie Rex to the rest of these, that we can identify some of these people that still are not identified. And we have to see what the trial does. I know that right now they are in parts of trying to exclude certain evidence, and we shall just have to wait and see. But hopefully, we have a reasonable jury and they find him guilty of all of these murders. And to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.